If I could have your attention, we're going to go ahead and begin because the camera is supposed to go on at 7 o'clock. So they told me to make sure I start right on time. So I'm not sure if that clock's right or my watch is right. So I'm a minute or two to go on it. So we'll just begin, just in case they're already on. Okay, call the meeting to order. Would everybody please stand and join me in saying the pledge of allegiance to the flag and remain silent for peace, Ukraine. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I'd like to welcome you all to our All Berwyn Committee, or A.B.C. meeting. We have these bi-monthly throughout the year, and if anything important comes up that we think the people need to know about it, we have a scheduled meeting for that too. We used to have them every month through September through June, but we cut back on that, especially with the pandemic. We don't want to have too many people in one room, so we limit the number of people that are coming, and we also have it live screened so that people can see it at home. They don't have to be worried about being exposed. Many of our members are senior citizens, and I do mean senior, so a lot of them do stay home now that they have the capability of seeing it on screen. So again, welcome. A.B.C. is an organization. It's a nonpartisan, non-sectarian. We try to strive to keep the people in Berwyn informed. Sometimes when there's projects that come about, and we try to find out what the people feel about it, then pass that information on to our elected officials. We are not a political organization, so we do not endorse any candidates. We do not take sides in the election. We just want to make sure that the people get to see the candidates and hear from the candidates so that they can be informed voters. So when it comes time to go to the polling place or mail in the polling votes, they know who they're voting for rather than just taking a guess and say, eeny, meeny, miny, mo. Thank you again for those of you that are running, that are here. Thank you. We appreciate your participation in this. At the front desk there, the little desk, I did leave some pencils there. Please take some. We had some pencils printed up with our name. As I was saying before, my pencil sharpener broke down, so they're not sharpened. But I'm sure you'll be able to get a sharpener or a knife out and sharpen them the old-fashioned way, that you'll be able to use them. We had them printed up with our A.B.C. logo on there, and I hope you'll take them with. Also, there is an application for membership if you're interested in joining the All Berwyn Committee. And again, you don't have to live in Berwyn, because we have people that are owners here, business owners. We have people that are friends of Berwyn that come out and support Berwyn in many endeavors. And we also try to get them involved in as much things as possible too. This organization was formed in April of 1946, so we've been around for a long time. We're not a Johnny-come-lately organization, and we do try to do the best we can. Two of the good things that I was made aware of when I first joined A.B.C. was that they were part of the organizations that helped save the land where the high school is located now. So Morton West was a farm, Gage's farm, and that was going to be sold to developers. Well, part of it was sold to developers, but the other part was kept for high school, and we're so glad that we had people involved fighting for that and kept it open. Also, when they decided to open up the Morton Junior College at the time on Central Avenue, we were part of that fight too to keep that going. And I know there was a Rocket Express property that was contaminated, and we fought to get that area cleaned up. So we have been able to get involved in the community doing things that benefit not just Berwyn, but the area, the whole area around us. So if you're interested in joining us, please do so. It's only a $10 dues per year. It's if you're an individual, if you're an organization or a business, it's $20. So please consider joining us. Okay, normally we would have our regular business meeting going on at this time, but because we have the candidates here and we want to try to give you as much time as possible to speak, we're going to bypass that and just go directly to our program. Tonight we have candidate forum, which involves the election. Candidates are running for election in the June 28th primary. Some of the people here have their opponents here, some don't, but we're going to let all the people that are present and are running for office speak. So if I miss somebody, please let me know so that we give you a chance to speak. We're going to start out with our 16th District Cook County Commissioner, Leticia Leti Garcia, who is running for the position. Leti, right?
Good afternoon. Thank you, Berwyn neighbors, friends, Facebook audience, for taking the time to be here today, and thank you for the All Berwyn Committee for the invitation and hosting this event to keeping us informed. My name is Leticia Garcia, and I'm running to be your next Cook County Commissioner of the 16th District. I'm a first-generation Mexican-American. My parents, similar to many immigrant stories, came here to provide a better life for their children. As a result of their strict child rearing, I am a pandemic COVID registered nurse. My sister is a teacher, and my brother is a police officer. I am a trilingual pandemic COVID registered nurse who during the pandemic was super involved wherever there were shortages, which, let's face it, it was everywhere. I joined other nurses, community leaders in delivering food, masks, water. We hosted vaccine drives. So I really put myself out there to make sure that our community was taken care of. I currently work per diem at Alivio Medical Center, the City of Chicago VAX program, and here at Berwyn Township as a registered nurse. I've been involved in my community, besides nursing, for over a decade. I've been currently in nonprofits, programs, community groups, protests that help strengthen our community. For example, I volunteer with women in domestic violence, community groups, shelters, advocate, advisor for them, for their kiddos, part of Mujeres Latinas en Acción, the Young Professional Board, in their events and fundraising committee. I've been an advocate for the kiddos in the foster program through the Cook County CASA program. I volunteer for nurse and overall events for veterans, homeless, senior citizens, Scouts troop, children, and education. I volunteer and have helped host cleanups to help beautify our community. I foster cats and dogs to help them rehabilitate them, to get them adopted. I'm a member of several organizations, chapters, and executive boards, such as DePaul's Latinx Alumni Board, the National Association of Hispanic Nurses, the first of its kind Illinois Transplant Fund, where we help pass legislation to allow people without medical insurance to get life-saving organ transplants at no cost to them or to taxpayer dollars. I can talk on several things of what I've done over the last decade, but my goal here isn't to boast. It's not to say of all the things that I've done. It's not here to make sure that I'm the right person for everyone. I'm asking you to consider me on 6/28/22 because I want you to see my name and associate it to all the things that I have done and all the things I plan to do. I'm a person who's ready to be your next commissioner. I want to continue picking up my sleeves. I'm not a career politician. I'm not being backed by big machines or other big politicians. I'm a person who picks up their sleeves, has been ready to go to work, has done the work for over the last decade, and now I want to have a bigger impact by helping a bigger community, by having a bigger role. But I can't do that without your support. I want to be the commissioner for everyone, not just a selected few, not just selected areas. I want to show up and work with the community, get your concerns heard. I don't just show up for photo ops. As a nurse, I know what it's like to work with the Cook County healthcare system and push for preventive, accessibility, and tight budgets. As a pro-choice feminist, I want to continue pushing for women's rights to their bodies and have every pregnant candidate, including myself right now, for equal pay, maternity, paternity leave, and lactation consultants. I want to focus on public safety, which nowadays is a concern almost everywhere we go. I want to increase Cook County Sheriff's budget to hire counselors and find more support for drug addictions and mental illnesses. I want to work on infrastructure, which nowadays is a concern as well. I want to tackle those areas that get overseen or passed, like that area doesn't belong to me, well, that one is for a different department. Let's just really work together as a community, and I want to be able to bridge that together. I want to be an advocate for fair wages, equal pay, safe work environments, and equitable contracts. I can go on and on of the list of the things that I want to do. But I hope that you do consider me, and I really wish my opponent was here to speak a little bit and question. But my opponent has voted Republican over 20 times. He has Republican ideology. He was a Republican state rep. He's a career politician who is disguised as a Democrat to be able to be appointed to this position. I don't feel that he's making a difference in our community. Prior to somebody else coming into this race, he hasn't really stepped foot in our communities. That's why I want to be your next commissioner. I have been involved, and I will continue being involved. I will continue being the voice and representing us. I am a leader, an activist, a humanitarian, here to represent you. I ask you, with my experience, my ambition, but with your vote, can we change the face of politics? Can you vote for me on 6/28 of 22 for Letty Garcia? Thank you.
Letty, Letty, you have a seat up here, please? Her opponent was invited to speak. I sent out invitations 2-3 times. And he was invited to come in and speak, but I did not hear back from him. So Letty was gracious enough to come in and speak. Thank you. Our next speaker will be candidate for a Democratic committeeman, Melissa Morenson.
Paper. My name is Missy Moritzen. It's pronounced Moritzen. It's Danish, not Dutch. Those are the wooden shoe people. And we're not IKEA, that's Swedes. So please don't confuse us. I live on 15th and Clarence, a little yellow house with my 4-year-old son who goes to preschool at Havlicek. I teach political science at the College of DuPage, where I've been for 7 years. I was at Dominican University prior to that. Before that, I worked for Chicago City Council for an alderman, for Jesse Granado. It's where I got my real experience, and then naturally, of course, as a lobbyist and a consultant after that. I have a PhD in urban politics. My dissertation was on suburban economic development, or the politics of suburban economic development. I'm a teacher. That's my identity. That's how I identify, how I consider myself the most. So I'm running for this position to bring civic engagement and voter empowerment to this office. At COD, that's basically what I do. That's what I've been doing in DuPage since day one. I've held voter registration drives all over the county, all over District 502, and that's a little bit of a misunderstanding. We are part of Cook County and part of Will as well. So I've registered voters. There I've held clinics on how to run for office. How ironic that I am now running for office. So I did take my own advice. And I've worked on civic education clinics with community partners, with elected officials in the area, with other groups, with nonprofits, and with other schools. Also, my job is to teach government. I wrote a state and local politics course for the college. I wrote an urban politics course for the college, and I also wrote a book on these issues for the college. What I've learned is that people find government really confusing. It's this Byzantine structure. In Illinois, we have over 7,000 units of local government. People are like, why are there 15 entities on my property tax bill? And so they need it translated to them. Well, I'm a teacher, and I can do that. I can translate that for people. And that's what I want to do. That is what I can bring to this position. That is the difference that I can make in this position, that civic education piece. I think people yearn for that understanding. I think people want to be connected to that piece of their government. And if we can find a way to do that, right? If we can say, here is the tool to do it, I think people will grab onto it with both hands. Why in this position, right? Like, just go ahead and do it. You do it at COD, just do it here in Berwyn anyway without this position. I'm a Democrat, right? I am unabashedly a Democrat. I support the Democratic Party, and I've voted Democrat from day one. I want my party to be big and beautiful and strong and have lots of voters, and I want to register a lot of people. And when they register, I want them to vote Democrat. How do I do that? I start here in Berwyn. I start locally, right? I start with my neighbors, the people who live on my block, the people who live next door to me, the people who live, I know I'm in North Berwyn, the people who live in South Berwyn too. We can all get along, it's possible. If people are educated, right? If they have the skills, if they have the knowledge in English, in Spanish, in Polish, in whatever language, right? If they have that empowerment piece, if they feel inside of themselves like they understand what's going on, they will use that information. I know this because I'm a teacher. And when my students start the course, they're like, what is going on? At the end of the 16 weeks, the proverbial light bulb goes off, right? The students say, I get it. Well, most of them, some of them don't. But anyway, we won't focus on that. I believe in the democratic platform, right? I support unions 100%. I am a union leader at my campus. I support strong public education. Obviously, as a community college teacher, that is what we do. I support the environment. I support common sense gun laws. I support racial justice. I support everything that the Democratic Party stands for. So why not take this civic education piece, this voter empowerment piece, this Democratic Party piece, fuse them together, right? And create a position that will do this here in Berwyn. You can do that by voting for me on June 28th. Thank you.
Melissa, have a seat up here. Thank you. That's okay. Okay, our next speaker is going to be our new state senator, Micah Porfirio, who again will be making a presentation.
All right. Thank
Welcome.
you. I appreciate. Thank you to President Ramos for the invitation. Thanks for everyone who came out tonight. Thank you to the other candidates for your willingness to serve the public. Mike Porfirio, running the 11th District State Senate. First, I'll talk a little bit about the 11th District, why I'm a fit for the 11th District, a little bit myself, and my plan. So, 11th District covers Cicero, Berwyn, North Riverside, LaGrange Park and Brookfield, LaGrange, Countryside, Hodgkins, Justice, Bridgeview, Bedford Park, Summit, Burbank, and parts of 23rd, 13th Ward in Chicago. I've lived in the district my entire life. My family has roots in the district, probably going back 80 years. I think that grandpa on my mom's side came to Summit after the Armenian genocide, so we've been here a while. My mom grew up in Summit. My parents got married at St. Joe's in Summit, grew up in Bridgeview. My wife and I got married at St. Albert's in Burbank, raising our 3-month-old daughter in the district. I've served on the Justice Willow Springs Water Commission. I ran the Public Works Department in Bridgeview, was the village administrator in Summit, served on the Lyons Township Board. So I know the district. I've served the district at a very local grassroots level. I've been very involved in the local democratic politics of the district, trying to build that big tent, beautiful party, make it younger, make it more diverse, make it stronger. So I think that background in the district, those roots in the district, make me know it, make me know the pulse, make me know the needs. Trust me, I have a mom who will still, slap me across the head if I do something wrong and don't deliver and serve the public well. So that's a little bit of my background in the district. Otherwise, I grew up in a union household. First generation of my family to go to college. My brother and I both went to the Naval Academy, a service academy. I've kind of dedicated my entire adult life to public service. Outside of local government, that other organization's been in the Navy. Have about 7.5 years active duty, still in the reserves, 18 years total. That includes deployments to the Iraqi oil platforms, Pakistani earthquake relief, Operation Bright Star in Egypt, missions in South Korea, humanitarian missions in Central America, Haiti, Colombia, Ecuador. 9 months as the senior military officer with a NATO mission training and advising the Afghan police. Again, that background and perspective, I think, just gives me a good worldview and helps me also just be able to work with people from across the spectrum. I want to be that next generation of leadership for the district. I think we need young blood. We need new blood. We need to have people that are going to keep Illinois competitive and attractive. We need to build capacity. We need to have force multipliers. Illinois is such a great human capital and talent pool, right? These great public universities, these great community colleges, this geographic hub of infrastructure. We have this huge naval station up at Great Lakes. We have this huge joint base down at Scott Air Force Base. We need to keep these people who come to Illinois for their education to serve in Illinois. We have to keep it attractive and competitive. We have to, promote development and business opportunities. We should want Illinois to be an incubator and a place that people want to start a business. We can't keep affording this mass exodus that's hurting us. It's hurting us politically. We're losing power in D.C. And it's also hurting us because when it comes time to continue to expand opportunity, the working families in our district are the ones that get hit the hardest, right? Because we're the ones paying taxes, paying property taxes. So, I'm a big believer rising tides lift all ships. So we gotta make sure we do that in Illinois. We gotta make sure that we take advantage of all the opportunity and advantages that we have to prepare and position ourselves for the future, for the next wave of where the economy is going, modernization, and I think by having a new generation of leadership, we'll be able to do that. So, again, Mike Porfirio, Democratic candidate for the 11th Senate District. I know the district well. Always a privilege and honor to serve, and again, want to make sure we have good government, smart government that's effective, efficient, and equitable. So, thank you very much for your time.
Mike, you can stay right there.
Sure.
Okay. All right. We're going to have questions now, so if anybody has questions, we'll take your questions. The two of you could use the mics that are on the stand there. So if you want to stand up and be close to it. Okay. Questions. Anybody have any questions for any of the candidates? Yes.
Mike, what do you think is like the biggest reason we have this mass exodus of Illinois right now?
Well, I think there's a couple. One is, I think one is pretty basic. I think one is, when people get ready to retire, they go where it's warm, right? And I don't mean that in a flippant way, but where do people go? They go to Florida, they go out west. So we can't overcome that, but we can mitigate it, right? So I think that's one piece. The other piece, I think, is that Illinois with the property taxes and taxes, when people don't see a tangible return on their investment, when people lose a little bit of faith in government that that public money is going back to make sure that public infrastructure, public education, public schools, public safety is being enhanced in an effective, efficient, and equitable way. They may go where they think the grass is a little bit greener. Again, I think sometimes we have people who cross the board, they work in Illinois, but they're living in Indiana. Some people who've, leave Illinois and retire somewhere else on a public pension. People who come here again to get their education, and then we don't promote and attract them enough to stay here, right? I mean, people are coming to Illinois to get a world-class education, whether that's at U of I, UIC, Northwestern, U of C, or other great public universities or great community colleges, and we're not keeping them. Right, so how do we do that, right? How do we deploy our state and other governments to give them reasons to stay, right? How do we make it where, hey, starting a business in Illinois is the right move, because we're gonna give you a little bit of some help and some assistance and support, because again, you're gonna be bringing jobs and opportunity to us. So. I think there's a patchwork of reasons, and we have to mitigate that and make ourselves as attractive as possible to stop that.
Yes, go ahead.
I have a question for Melissa. So Melissa, in Berwyn, we have maybe about 10% of the population votes, even like in a good year. And so a lot of times we just have one person running. We don't have two people running. If you are elected to this position, what will you do to increase voter turnout and to increase people being enthusiastic about elections and wanting to run?
So it's a several-part question. I think running, it turns out, is really difficult. I was making the comment earlier that teaching about running and actually running are two very different things. Getting petitions signed and then putting the packet together and doing it all, I think the sort of candidate clinics that I ran in DuPage County would go a long way to help teach people how to run, even for local offices. I actually got an attorney to help me run for this position, which seems kind of ridiculous that for a local office that you would need to get an attorney, but I had an attorney that helped me put the paperwork together. To get people enthusiastic, I think you need an organization that sustains activities, not just one 4-year race to one 4-year race, but constantly through the years. And so you need a party that survives. You need an organization, a substantial organization that survives throughout the months, and we just don't have that here. And so that's what I want to do. And I think if you put on clinics and you make things fun for people, and yes, it sounds kitschy, but if you have things like pizza and balloons and you make it fun, and that's what we do in DuPage. I'm making DuPage sound really great, aren't I? But if you do things like that and you make it accessible and you don't hold it over people's head and you don't make it sound like the politicians, I think you can make people want to get involved.
Anyone else? Questions? Yes.
I have a question for Ms. Buster, yes. Let's say that you win, and if you had the choice on what committees you would like to be on as a commissioner, even though you do have a background, there's strong background in healthcare, would there be other commissions that you feel that you would have a background and the interest concerning them?
Yes, thank you. As a nurse, like I said, it is the first one that I would be very passionate about, just because I am a floor nurse and I have the most experience there with tight budgets and things like that, and actually like floor experience. Besides that, I would like to work on the forest preserve, just because I am super involved in overall like making everything, beautifying, park cleanups and things like that. So I want to make things accessible, trails. We actually have something coming up with the Sierra where there's toxins in the cement and like little things like that we need to address. These are things that other committees are taking care of that sometimes get overseen by just overall the passing of who is really responsible for these committees. So the forest preserve would be another one. And the last one that I think would be at the highest of my interest would be infrastructure in general. Just because, again, it's something that I mentioned that we seem to pass the bucket around of like who's responsible for this specific road and stop signs, safety, things like that, where they just kind of pass the bucket like, oh, well, it's not in your jurisdiction. Oh, it's somebody else's responsibility. I want to make sure that I am the representative to say, let's tackle this together and work as a team to make sure that it gets addressed.
Okay. Anybody else? Questions? Yes.
I have a question for Missy. I noticed your opponent is not here, so I can't ask him. I just prefer to ask him, but I know that he is our mayor here in Berwyn and holds both positions. I don't understand a lot about the committeeman position, but are there any conflicts of interest of the same, that come with the same person holding both positions? And then my question that is really for you is, what are some of the things that you plan to do differently than he is doing now?
I think that when you hold more than one position, yes, it's inherent, right? That there can be a conflict of interest if you're the mayor and a committee person, if you're the mayor and how do you adequately represent? How can you promise? I promise I'm representing everything fairly. And so I think that I don't agree that they both go hand in hand. I think separation of powers, right? That's how we think about the government, the state government and the federal government. We have a judiciary, we have an executive, we have a legislative, and we do it on purpose because we don't want one to be too big, and we have checks and balances. And so similarly, I think we need to do the same thing for this. To the second part of your question, what would I do differently? I'm sorry. Well, so he's not, the way that he's chosen to exercise this position is a little bit different, right? So he's not chosen to be on any committees, for instance, and so I would like to be on some committees. I would like to do candidate recruitment, for instance. I would like to do general party building. I think that stuff is really interesting. I think it's really important. I think it's important to attract, as Mr. Porfirio said, I think younger candidates, people who are interested, people who are invested, people who have been in their communities. Not, I think it's great, people who've been here for a long time, but people who move to a community and say, I am dedicated to this community. I want to make it my home for the rest of my life. I think that's important too. So that's what I want to do. But also what's really important to me is that voter education piece. If I can say to my neighbor, hey neighbor, this is what the mosquito abatement district does, and make it transparent and clear, I think that's really important.
Anybody else? Questions? Yes.
I have a question for all the candidates, because, like, you're all going for a position you don't currently serve. So looking at this position, learning about it, what do you see in this state or district or that you think is the biggest problem that within our politics that you don't plan on taking part in if you can do with? Does that make sense? Like, what do you see in that position that people do that may be legal, but maybe a little unethical, maybe you don't agree with it, that is common practice that you don't want a part of? Is there anything like that?
Want me to go first? Okay. One is right now I'm going to focus on being a full-time legislator. Once elected, if elected, honestly, I think some of this is, I think as Ms. Morrison said, I mean, some of this is, I think, getting back to serving our constituents, and also I think some of this is just the trends of right now in the United States, and everything's becoming national, right? When I was knocking on doors, I probably got, I got about knocked on over probably 1,500, 2,000 doors to get signatures, and I hear about President Biden. I had to hear about a lot of issues in D.C. and I had to keep. I'm not Senator Durbin. I'm not Senator Duckworth. I'm running for state senate. I think that some of this is we have to all work together. I think the collaboration's important, and I cut my teeth in local government. I think, and I think sometimes where mayors do a great job is there is no right wing or left wing way to fix streets and pick up garbage and do all those delivery of service that kind of build trust in the community. So I think my biggest thing is actually like focusing on that job, right? Focusing on state senate and focusing on bringing back funds and money to local infrastructure, being an advocate and steward of property tax money, fighting the good fight on making sure that Illinois continues to have legislation that promotes pro-labor, pro-choice, and all the things that we want to make sure we have in our state. But again, I think some of this is that the national trends have made everything national. Sometimes, no matter who the candidate is, they sound like they're running for Congress. And honestly, I taught ROTC at Purdue at one point, and it's the same thing. Sometimes we have to go back and go back to the kind of the brass tacks and anchor ourselves in our position and making sure that we're dedicated to that. I'm not saying down the road, I think any of us up here, we're all wired a little bit different and have some ambitions, but I'm not going to turn around and run for something again in 2 or 4 years. I want to see myself in the long haul here, at least for the next decade or so, if the people will have me and focus on that. So I think that's my thing. I'm kind of try to be laser focused on those local needs, working together, not just alienating people. I think sometimes we got to win hearts and minds, right? Sometimes we have to be able to convert. We got to keep, we got to make sure the suburbs stay democratic, and to do that, we have to make sure that we're being tough, fair, speaking truth to power, speaking based off facts, but at least having some common decency and civility, so that we're not just continuing to divide and divide and divide.
I want to make sure that we are all getting addressed. I want to make sure that there's no backroom deals, and something that sets me a little bit apart is I am running for this position. So I'm not going to get appointed. I'm not necessarily running just because it's not necessarily like it's time to make a change. So differences that I want to make that sets me differently from my opponent is, one, I'm not appointed. I'm not a career politician. I'm not accepting backroom deals or anything that has given me the advantage. Not a career politician, running for the first time, and I will make sure that we vote fairly. Unlike my opponent who passed a pro-discrimination HB 2330 for discrimination, he was one of the 11 nays compared to the 105 who were able to say, hey, something's wrong here. I'm not disguised as someone who actually cares about the community. I actually am a trustworthy Democrat for as long as I voted, and I will not accept backroom deals, politician money to make sure that things get endorsed in my favor, because it's not about me. It's about the community. It's about the best interest for the constituents. It's about making progress, and it's about making change and changing the face of regular politicians to make differences.
I'll say the reason what finally pushed me over the edge and made me want to run was the appointment of her opponent, who is not a Democrat. And so I thought, oh man, like Democratic committeemen can appoint Republicans to Democratic seats. It just sort of blew my mind. And so that sort of idea that we're not bringing Democrats we're not representing Democrats and we're not bringing Democratic candidates into the fore, but we are there are points about, sort of being open and being out and being transparent. Machine politics thrives in the dark. It thrives on backroom deals. It thrives on being only responsive to certain core constituencies and icing other people out. And I think it's really important that we make sure that we bring everybody in. As a union representative, I can't just ice out certain parts of my constituency, right? I represent 304 full-time faculty members. And so the masking stuff, for instance, when we had a mask on campus, now we have a mandatory vaccine mandate, otherwise you have to test. I mean, you can imagine. Some people aren't thrilled with that, but I have to represent them nonetheless. I can't say, I don't like you, or I don't agree with you, so I'm not going to represent you. It's one of the hardest things I've had to do, as we call it welfare chair, and maybe they call it chief steward or something else, business associate in another union. But it's one of the hardest things I've had to do. Listen to someone that I cannot believe that that's what they believe, but I have to, right? And I have to represent them, and the contract is a contract is a contract, right? Well, the law is the law, the government is the government, and it works for everybody, right? It doesn't just work for some people, it doesn't just work for some part, and it doesn't work for just some part of the Democratic Party. And so that part I want to, that's my biggest pet peeve I would like to get rid of.
Okay, anyone else? Questions? Melissa, just a minute. Melissa, would you move over toward the mic, because your voice may not be picked up by the, okay, I'm sorry, go ahead.
My question's for Melissa, and this is like really my own clarification to my question. Your position is one of those that checks signatures, like the committee person, the committee position is the one that helps check the signatures for people who come into this position?
Nope, that's the county.
That's the county.
Yeah, so this is a relatively little responsibility, right? So it's dealing with election judges. If there's a vacancy, they would be helping to appoint that vacancy. And so what I'm saying is that I want to do more. I want to make more of this position, and that would be through voter education, through building the party. And that. Yes.
Bringing goods to election judges, probably a good job.
I did not read that in the state statute, but
One of the things I've appreciated about your campaign is like how you shared like more specifically what the position does. Because that's helped me learn what this position can do, right? Like the breadth it can do. And so thank you for that.
I think what's exciting about the position is that you can be like a cheerleader for the Democratic Party. So finally, I can be a cheerleader.
One thing about checking signatures, that's usually done by the opponent, because that's one way to knock them off the ballot. So they're the first ones that check signatures to see if they're actually on the ballot or on the voting rolls or not. So that's the start of checks. Anyone else? Anyone else? Any questions or comments that you'd like to make? No? That's it? Going once? Going twice? Okay, well, I want to thank the three of you. Oh, I have a question for Mike. I'm sorry, I have one question. Mike, currently, the pensions and Social Security are not taxed in Illinois. What is your position on that?
Well, I think anytime we talk about pension reform, we have to keep in mind, what's going to pass constitutional muster. So I think that's just a realization. I think one thing that we should really consider, though, is, when people leave Illinois, and retire, I'd probably say I'm probably open to the fact of if you leave Illinois and you're spending our tax money somewhere else, maybe we tax the out-of-stater. So I think
Although the state they moved to may be taxing them because they're residents
yeah, it's
there.
taxing our money, and that's,
Yeah, right.
And so I think anything is, again, I think we have to protect public pensions. I think some of it is the kind of the recalibration so that we're protecting public pensions for really what they were designed for. The working people, to give them a comfortable retirement that then spurs the economy, and not so much sometimes these the people who are maybe being enriched by pensions. So obviously we need some pension reform. It's going to take a lot of smart people sitting around and again, being willing to roll up their sleeves, But I will say, our generation, we can't allow the erosion of Social Security and public pensions and shrug our shoulders and say that's okay. You know, we gotta make sure that we keep it for ourselves, we keep it for our children and the next generation. So, but yeah, we gotta do something. There has to be some type of, some recalibration and reform there.
Okay. All right. Last call, anybody? Okay, I want to thank the three of you for coming and speaking before our crowd. Thank you very much. Okay, our next two speakers are running for the same position. State Representative, 21st District. We have the challenger, and we have the current representative, Honorable Michael Zalewski, and Abdel Nassar Rashid. We'll have you speak first.
Good evening, everyone. Good to be here. Thank you all for coming today. Thank you, Jim, for the invitation and all the organizers of this event. My name is Abdel Nasser Rashid. As you know, I am running for state representative of the 21st District. 10 years ago, when I came back home after graduating from college, I started my career working in the immigrant rights movement. I spent 3 years at the Illinois Coalition for Immigrant and Refugee Rights, fighting for immigration reform across the state and across the country. And we passed an important bill to allow undocumented immigrants to get driver's licenses that Governor Quinn signed in 2013. I then went to work for Congressman Chuy Garcia when he ran for mayor against Rahm Emanuel, served as his field director. Then I spent about 4 years in Cook County government, 3 of them with Cook County Clerk David Orr, where I was his policy director and his deputy chief of staff, working for efficient, ethical, and transparent government. When Cook County passed an ordinance that required a minimum wage, a $15 minimum wage, and paid sick leave throughout the county, and municipalities started opting out of that, I worked with Clerk Orr to go around the county to say, do not opt out of that, do not take away workers' wages and paid sick leave. I helped work on the effort to combine the Cook County Clerk's Office with the Cook County Recorder's Office, saving taxpayers millions of dollars. We worked on election reforms, democratic reforms like online voter registration and same-day voter registration, and so much more. David Orr was really a mentor of mine. I learned a lot from him, and it was a real privilege working with him. When it comes to running for state representative, let me share a few things. We have an affordability crisis, and we need to make sure that people can afford to live. Property taxes, utilities, gas, and groceries, that the average family isn't seeing their pocketbook drained by these expenses. We need to equitably fund our public education, make sure that we're investing in schools, that the state is investing in schools so that every child can have an opportunity to thrive, and that our local school districts aren't over-relying on property taxes as they are now. And we need to make sure that we're passing strong ethics reforms at the state so that, for example, the Inspector General has real teeth to investigate bad actors, and so that politicians who are under clouds of corruption can't spend campaign cash on their personal legal defense. Let me tell you why this race is so important. There couldn't be a starker contrast in this election. You have a choice. Voters have a choice between someone who is a protege of Mike Madigan, Dan Lipinski, and the corrupt Madigan machine, or someone who's fought the Madigan machine. You have a choice between someone who started off as a lobbyist for utility companies, then as state representative, paved the way for utility rate hikes by companies like ComEd and People's Gas, or someone who'll vote no to let these companies, these public utilities, raise the rates on taxpayers year after year after year. You have a choice between someone who voted to take away the right of a young woman who was raped from getting an abortion without first notifying her parent, or someone who will always protect a woman's right to choose. These are stark differences, and these are serious issues. It's time for new, ethical, principled representation in this district. My parents came to this country with no savings, with no education. They built a life for me and my siblings. They worked minimum wage jobs. My mom ran a booth at the local flea market. My father ran a small business. They saved up. They bought a home. They entered the middle class. And they were so proud when their son got into Harvard. So proud. I have two young children, two young daughters and a young son. And I want them to grow up in a country where they can be given the opportunity to thrive, where they can be respected, where they can live with dignity. But that path that my parents embarked on successfully is that's so elusive for too many families. Why? Because of income inequality, because of a lack of affordable housing, because of a corrupt property tax system, because of the cost of gas and groceries. And so we need a representative who you can trust to represent working and middle-class families in Springfield, someone whose record you can count on, someone who you know day after day will make it their mission to fight for working families. That's why I'm running, and that's why I'm asking for your vote. Thank you.
Have a seat. Honorable Mike Zalewski.
Thank you, everybody. It's good to be here. I want to start by commending Letty and Mike and Missy. I know you as Nas. If you prefer not to go by Nas, let me know. All right, fair enough. Nas. It's a hard thing to do this. It's a hard thing to get up in front of people and be held accountable and ask your positions, and it's not fun, and you get all up in your feelings about it, and you wonder how it's going to go. And tonight was a testament of how cool this all really is. We had a nurse who fought on the front lines of COVID, who's doing everything she can to keep people healthy. We have a teacher at a community college who's doing everything she can to educate people. We have an immigrant. I mean, who came over to this country and made it to Harvard. That's the Democratic Party in 2022. And it's fascinating and it's amazing. And I'm proud to be it. Whether I win or I lose, I'm proud to be part of this party. Nas is right in a lot of ways. This is a contrast election. It's a referendum on me. And I'm prepared for that. I've been out of the doors every single day since I got back. And the conversations are good. They're honest, they're refreshing, they're transparent. Sometimes we agree and sometimes we don't. But I'm held accountable to the people, and I'll continue to do that throughout the election. When it's a referendum on me, you look to the record, and you look to what I've done in the General Assembly, and I try to be modest, and I try to do what I can to acknowledge that it's not always about me, as my spouse would tell me all the time, but you do want to celebrate the things you've accomplished. And in the 12 years I've been in the General Assembly, I'm proud of my record. There's no other way to say it. I sat in a conference room in 2017, during the summer of 2017, on the brink of fiscal collapse. I was chairperson of the House Revenue and Finance Committee, and we were days away from the controller saying the state was insolvent. And over the course of the next 5 years, we've rebuilt Illinois into the best fiscal conditions it's seen in a generation. We passed a budget this past spring that fully funds pensions, fully funds the evidence-based funding formula, which is the path to true property tax relief. You fund schools, property tax bills will go down. We expanded the earned income tax credit to 18 to 25-year-olds and 65 and over, and ITIN filers, so that if a person comes over to this country and contributes to the economy, they get to take part in the earned income tax credit, and they get to put money back in their pocket. We cut the grocery tax. We cut the gas tax. We gave school teachers who go out of their way every single summer because they know there's going to be a student in their class that can't afford supplies. We put an extra $250 in their pocket so that they could go get that kid the extra USB drive or the extra thing they need to be able to start the school on time. This is the budget that we put together, and I was a big part of that. On issues other than on the budget and fiscal, I'm a strong Democrat. My record on choice is clear, and it's unequivocal. I'm pro-choice. I supported the Reproductive Health Act, which says that when and if Roe is overturned, we will immediately have a modern medical act in place to protect women so that they can be able to access reproductive health. I supported and voted for House Bill 40, which got rid of an archaic trigger law that said if Roe was ever overturned, we would return to an anti-choice state. I voted and I put together a budget that fully funds Planned Parenthood. I voted for access to contraception. There is no reasonable argument to be made against me. I am unequivocal pro-choice, and I will stand by that until the end. I'm the son of a garbage man. You're going to hear a lot over the course of this campaign about various things, but I started from humble roots too. My dad was on the back of a garbage truck. He worked his way up. He raised me and my sister. I'm blessed to live in Riverside. I have a spouse. I have 4 children. I go to public schools. I love them dearly. On climate, we passed the most equitable climate bill in a generation last year. It's going to lower the utility bills. It's going to bring in wind and solar. It cut out the utility companies from drawing the statute, and it makes sure that by 2040 we have a completely free carbon economy. I'm adamantly pro-labor. We have the strongest labor laws in the country. I was just at an event today where we're going to add more jobs as a result of the Chicago casino, another piece of legislation that I put forth. I stood against Bruce Rauner, along with my colleagues, for 4 years when he tried to turn this state into a right-to-work state, and he tried to destroy collective bargaining. I was on the front lines. We got it done. I'm proud of my record. This is a referendum on accomplishment. This is a referendum on problem solving. I'm a problem solver. I enjoy doing the job. I love it dearly. It's not the end-all be-all for me. I want to be successful at it. I want to earn votes, and I want to be back in Springfield. But the choice here is quite frankly, between a record and a promise. I'm a solid record during times of high instability, and I'm asking for your vote. Thank you, Jim.
Mike? Okay, we're going to open up for questions. Any questions? Questions? Yes.
This is for both the candidates. You both mentioned education as a high priority for both of you. What kind of plans do you have to bring equitable opportunities to the communities? Because you've been for 12 years, and I think we're still somewhat struggling with our education system where it's not equitable across all places. So what are your ideas, and what have you done within the last years to make sure that all communities, all districts have equal representation, and at what cost to the taxpayers?
Well, the evidence-based funding formula is a place to start. It was passed in conjunction with that 2017 budget. It was part of a negotiation to end the budget stalemate. For the first time, Illinois has a school funding system that allows for monies to go to the districts that need it most. And in Berwyn and Cicero, we finally have allocation of resources necessary so that kids can get the education they deserve. But it's not just about funding. We need to ensure that we have diverse curriculum. We need to make sure that we are paying our educators and are paying our ADPs enough so that we can compete for good paying, good educators, and they want to work in Berwyn. We want that, and I think we have like you mentioned, we have a lot of work to do, but we're on the right track.
Yeah, I think the evidence-based funding formula was a great step in the right direction, but it's only meaningful if we actually put in the funding for education. And so we need to make sure that we're funding our schools so that schools in Berwyn, schools in the 21st district are able to have the resources that they need to give every child an opportunity. Where in other districts where they have a very large property tax base, they get to have all the bells and whistles because they get to get all this property tax money that the wealthy can afford to pay to give the students everything that they need. whereas in the 21st district and other parts of the state, they're struggling because we can't afford extremely high property taxes, and it really is on the state to make sure that we fully invest in education.
Anybody else? Questions? Yes.
So I got involved in politics here because it's not just hyperbole, but it's fact, right? Cook County has the most people that get indicted and go to jail. We get so used to it, right? I mean, Steve Landeck is in here. Whoever, I don't even remember who Frank Aguilera, like whose place did he take that got indicted? So now we have the most recent one is ComEd that's taken out Mike Madigan. Abdel Nasser, can you explain to me the whole ComEd thing? And then also, like, how is your opponent and how are his family members involved in that scandal?
Okay. Well,
Sorry if it's too big of an
that's
issue.
okay.
I mean, we might have to
That's
spread this out over a
That's
couple
okay.
weeks.
No, so, ComEd is one of the main reasons that Mike Madigan is being indicted. And, they essentially tried to use their power in Springfield and their influence and their relationship with power brokers in Springfield, especially with Mike Madigan, to line the pockets of their shareholders to get favorable legislation and to give the speaker things that he wanted, former speaker, things that he wanted, like jobs, ghost payroll jobs on their payroll, lobbyists who got paid to do nothing, to basically sit at home. So that's the one of those people was my opponent's father. Representative Zaleski did start off as a lobbyist for utility companies. His record throughout his tenure in the legislature has been to allow the utilities to have more power to raise rates, to essentially cede authority of the legislature to the utilities. And what we've seen is a dramatic increase in rates. This isn't my campaign saying this. This is the Illinois Public Interest Research Group. These are organizations focused on consumer protection, focused on making sure that that families are protected, and they're the ones saying this. The result of those votes, the result of those laws has been that people's gas has, just in the last 4 years, the bills have gone up over 70%. I think for ComEd it's 20-30%. And families are paying the price for that. Families are paying the price. So I would say that our record, his record compared to mine, my commitment, is clear on this.
Am I allowed to respond? Okay. So you're right to be frustrated about corruption generally, and there are several wide-ranging investigations into public corruption in Springfield. You're never going to get me to say a cross word about my dad. I love him dearly. I've known the man my entire life. I would say on the issue of utility rates generally, my record isn't as portrayed by Nas. I voted for the governor. I voted to stick with Governor Quinn when he vetoed IEMA in 2013, which would have led to a massive rate increase. I voted for the Aries legislation in 2018 that the utilities tried to block because it would have affected rates. I also voted for CEJA. CEJA is a revolutionary climate spill, and it was not written by the utility companies. It was written by my colleagues, and it was written by the Citizens Utility Board, and it was written by the Attorney General's office, along with the green community that came together and enacted the most progressive climate legislation in a generation. Rates are going to go down as a result of my vote on CEJA, especially this year as a result of your ComEd bill is going to go down $19 as a result of my vote. It's unfair to characterize me as a utility tanker. I stand for, I do the best I can at this job, and I'm proud of my record.
Anybody else? Questions? Question?
I have a question for both of you. Do you think there should be term limits?
I can go, we're rotating, I'll go first. We actually passed a term limits bill this past year for legislative leaders. So as a result of that legislation, legislative leaders will be term limited if the bill were to become law. I voted for that bill. The second thing I would say is I'm term limited by virtue of this primary. You're going to have my fate in your hands, and I stand before the voters, and they decide whether they want me back every year. So I'm for term limits for legislative leaders, and I think the voters get to decide on term limits overall.
We agree on this issue. I'm for term limits for legislative leaders as well, and I do think the rest is left up to elections.
You had a question back there?
Mike, I go to a lot of events in Berwyn, and I don't see you here very often. Your kids go to public school of Riverside. It's a very nice school district, elementary, high school. Would you send your kids to Portland? Would you send your kid to live in Berwyn? And where do you spend money in Berwyn?
Do you have a business in Berwyn?
I do.
What's it called?
Big guys.
I was there last week. I had the burger on Monday.
Really?
Yeah, it was very good. I also like Mindy's idea of pizza for committeemen. I'm a big pizza fan. So I love your burgers, and I spend money in Berwyn quite a bit. To answer your question about Morton West, I would send my kids to public school if that's where they wanted to go. My kids are going to go to public school because they enjoy going to public school. Your question, though, I think is based upon the idea that RB is different than Morton West, and that's a very legitimate point to raise, and it goes to the point about the evidence-based funding formula that we need to invest in schools, and we need to continue to invest in schools, and we need to make it so that you don't have to ask that question anymore. To your point about not being seen in Berwyn, that's certainly something that you may feel, and I won't quibble with you about it. The district is dramatically changed. It's a Berwyn district now. I have relationships with any number of members of the Berwyn community. I represented the district before it was 21, and it was 23, and then it became 21 again. And I got to know a lot of people in Berwyn. So I'm happy to be back. I'm going to continue to try to earn people's trust, and I look forward to being back at Big Guys.
I'd like to follow up with that, so.
Excuse me,
Oh, I'm sorry.
did you have a response? Were you going to say something about that?
No, I don't.
No? Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I have a follow-up. Mike. So you said it's been redistricted, but is there any involvement that you've had in Berwyn, like since it has been redistricted? Like, is there something wise or just activism or any sort of thing that you've done in Berwyn? Because you're saying it's been for 12 years, so we're just trying to
Is your question? I want to make sure I understand your question. That
involvement.
involvement in Berwyn is I would say based upon the district's configuration. I do have relationships with Berwyn residents. I have relationships with the Berwyn community stakeholders. Again, I won't dispute the notion that if you feel like you haven't seen me enough, then that's on me to do a better job of being out in Berwyn more. But I also would not suggest that I've been absent from Berwyn. I've done my best. I've delivered capital funding to Berwyn. Anytime a Berwyn resident comes down, I'm happy to visit with them in Springfield. So I'm all yours. Whenever you want to talk about Berwyn, I'm all in.
Okay, any question over here?
Mike, I would have to say to you, I know that you love your father, and I would never say that you should say anything bad about him that way. But I would say if my father had defrauded the Illinois to the public, and if my father was indicted, I would call that out. I would call that out if anybody did it, and I don't care who it is. I would say it before my family member, because it's not right. And I think that we're looking for honest people to run.
I'm an honest person, and I can only cite the support I've gotten in this election and the trust factor I have with constituents, my colleagues, my friends, my family. I won't try to convince you of anything other than I'm a trustworthy person. I've conducted myself admirably. I've always conducted myself with the utmost.
How would anyone here trust politicians in Illinois? We're 49th in the country. We have such tension that the state is horrible. That's why people are leaving the state. So, I mean, to say, if you were saying like people aren't I mean, that's BS. People are leaving the state in droves because it's a mess politically, and we're looking for honest leaders here. We're looking for people to be honest with us and to represent us honestly. That's what we're looking for, and that's why people are here.
If I can just add, we've worked together before, and this isn't about personalities, but it is about a corrupt political machine. This is about the type of politics that Mike Madigan and Dan Lipinski and others have engaged in for a long time that really hurt residents, that really hurt families, that really hurt our communities and our neighborhoods. And so when I have an issue with being appointed by your father and by Speaker Madigan to be the representative and being tied at the hip with the characters in politics who have really not been looking out for the best interests of our communities. And it is time for fresh blood. It is time for more diverse representation. It's time for folks who are held accountable to their constituents, who you can trust and know that that's who they're looking out for, that they're not being asked or told to do something by someone in a back room.
It's a fair critique, Naz. I would only say that there's no candidate in the state or the county that didn't have involvement with the Speaker Madigan. I mean, you ran in 2018 and you took a contribution from the Speaker for your county race.
I was the Democratic nominee, and I took a contribution from the Democratic Party.
Well,
you were appointed by your father and Speaker Madigan. You were appointed to the Revenue Committee by Speaker Madigan. You got tons of money from Speaker Madigan directly. When at the very end, when many of your colleagues were deserting Speaker Madigan, when it was clear the direction things were going, you stood by him. You stood by him.
I voted for Speaker Welch for Speaker.
Of course.
And so we're going to agree to disagree on this. I think over the course of the last 10 years, there's been a battle in this state to keep this state a blue island among a sea of red. And I was always going to be for the Democrat, and I was always going to protect working men and women and make this and prevent this from being not being a right-to-work state. And I supported the Democratic candidates, so that's my position.
Anybody else? Questions? Yes, in the back.
For both of you, what recent work have you done on social justice?
It's a great question. You go first.
I'm happy to start.
Yeah.
I started my career in the immigrant rights movement, working to push for immigration reform across the country, and really helping build what some of you may recognize the New Americans Democracy Project at the Illinois Coalition for Immigrant and Refugee Rights, which is an extremely successful and important immigrant engagement initiative to really build the voice and political power for immigrants. And since then, I've done work with the National Partnership for New Americans to empower new citizens, not just in Illinois, but across the country. In the 2020 election, I helped them draft a report that was covered by the Washington Post on the power of the vote of new citizens and a strategy to exercise that power, especially in the swing states where we had the opportunity to turn them blue. So it's something that is deeply personal to me as a son of immigrants, as a member of the immigrant community, and it's something that I've spent a lot of my professional career doing.
And I would cite specifically my work to get the earned income tax credit enacted this year, expand the earned income tax credit. That is a big win for the immigration community in this state. It expands from 18 to 25-year-olds and 65 or older, and I-10 filers for the first time are eligible, and the credit is fully refundable. That means that tax money for them in contributing to our economy is going to go back in their pocket. I've also supported the Healthy Illinois Fund that was supported by the Coalition for Immigrant Refugee Rights. I've been a proud supporter of immigration. We need to do more, but I've been there every step of the way.
Okay. Anyone else? Yes.
Quick question. I know you said you live in Riverside.
I live in Justice.
You live in Justice.
Mhm.
So this question is for both. It's wonderful that you've been able to run that political, politics for some time, and it's very good. So taxes, stuff like that.
I support the police. I also think there's an opportunity to holistically supplement the work they do so that we can ensure they're focusing on the things they need to focus on, and we're also helping individuals who may not need a police interaction but may need some sort of social service. For the first time this year, we have implemented a 988 number. 988 is going to be if you feel like a family member is having some sort of some sort of mental problem, you don't call 911, you call 988, and they get a social worker out to your house, and they make sure that that person's healthy, and they get them the care they need. Our budget this year funds the police. We add police cameras to make sure that if a crime is committed, it's accurately depicted on film so the police can do it. We've learned our lesson on crime. Harsh sentences do not work because they don't deter people. The way to crack down on crime is to catch the criminal, swift and certain. I've supported smart on crime policies my whole career. I believe in funding the police. I believe that we need to do more to ensure judicial accountability, and I'm proud of my record on that.
Yeah, we ask the police to do a lot of things. We ask them to respond to mental health crises. We ask them to respond to unruly students. We ask them to respond to homeless encampments. We ask them to respond to nonviolent crime. We ask them to respond to violent crime. And I agree that we need to invest in resources where the right respondent is the one taking care of a situation where police should not be needed. And every resident deserves to live in a safe neighborhood. And I support effective policing.
Okay, anybody else? Questions? No questions? Okay, one last one?
So I asked other candidates, if there's something in the position you're running for that really you think, whether it's legal or illegal, unethical or whatever, there's common practice that you think is wrong, that you won't take part in. It's Illinois government, you gotta have an answer or something that bothers you about Illinois government.
Oh, there's a lot of things that bother me about Illinois government. I think what you're asking for is there conduct you see that from my colleagues that bother me, and there certainly is. I try to be ethical when it comes to fundraising. I think in this universe of fundraising, there's enormous pressure on. There's going to be enormous pressure on me and Nas to raise money this cycle, and the separation of church and state there is getting really, really hard. We need to have periods of time per year that are devoted to government, and we need to have periods of time per year that are devoted to politics. And it is incredibly difficult as a candidate these days to separate the two. So if you're asking me, is there something that we should do to make sure that that there's something that's untoward about the way General Assembly and politics today work, that's it. We need to figure out a way for honest and ethical fundraising so that we're not put in positions of awkward, for lack of a better way of saying it. That's my answer for you.
I'll share two things. One is I think public utilities should be focused on serving families and serving communities and serving taxpayers, not primarily serving their shareholders. So I will not take public utility money. I don't think any candidate should take public utility money. That's one thing. I also think that looking at campaign expenditures of the fine-tooth comb is very important, and candidates and elected officials ought to justify their legal expenditures. Sure, you get a lawyer to help you with your petition, review your signatures, that's legitimate. A lot of money, as we saw in the recent Supreme Court decision that pushed it back to the legislature to identify what is a legitimate legal expenditure, because if someone is under a cloud of corruption, being indicted or not indicted, but is being investigated, and they're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars of campaign funds, I think that the voters ought to know what they're spending their money on. And right now, our laws do not require that.
All right, well, I want to thank you both for coming and spending the night here with us. I know you have a busy schedule with the campaign going on. As a former candidate myself, I know that you do have to go around and talk to a lot of people. And I appreciate the fact that you took time to come here and speak with us. So thank you very much. Thank the other speakers too. Once again, before we adjourn, I'd like to say that we are looking for more membership. And again, the membership is open to everybody. whether you live in Berwyn or not. As long as you're a friend of Berwyn, you're welcome to join us, so please consider joining. Again, applications are on the small table as you go out, and there's some pencils. Please take a pencil with you too to remind you of the A.B.C. Thank you again. Appreciate it. Thank you for coming, everybody.